I would like to thank Xerox for sponsoring, being a big sponsor this year at Canada 2013. Over to you, Michel.
Right, thanks very much. Well, I appreciate that. Welcome everybody. Nice to be here with you this afternoon. So Mike Lebrun is the Senior Solutions Architect for Xerox, our enterprise print services practice in Canada. And as such, Mike works with organizations all the way from British Columbia to Newfoundland, coast to coast, with higher ed and with other institutions. I myself as well work more on sort of the enterprise strategy, what's the commercial aspect, what's the higher education institution out to do with their print infrastructure. So Mike and I make kind of an interesting combination, Mike with a strong technical background, me with more sort of a enterprise and business objective or organization objective background. We get involved in 20 to 30 different engagements a year, working with clients, again, from coast to coast. And so what we did was we've been able to gather a lot of kind of macro views as to what's going on as organizations embrace the change that relates to their print and document infrastructure. What we wanted to do here today was share some of those views, some of those experiences we've had with lots of your colleagues across Canada. We have a very strong presence with lots of leading universities across Canada as it relates to the print and document infrastructure, as well as the commercial world. And we see some commonalities between both, some uniqueness inside of higher ed, of course, because of the nature of your client base, but some commonalities that really kind of will make this, I think, the session interesting for you. So I want to share those with you and see how we can make your life more interesting, and maybe you can apply it to your institution and what your objectives are. So we'll spend about 30 to 35 minutes and we'll delve into the users, we'll delve into the infrastructure, and we'll delve into the IT dynamics, largely as it relates to support, maintenance, ongoing investment that you have to make to keep that infrastructure up and running to serve all of these changes that are happening in your user community, your client community, and your infrastructure environment, and the economics in and around that. How do I make a perfect formula out of all that as you look at it from an IT and technical perspective? We see that the goal is to try to stimulate dialogue and ideas in and around how you can adapt to these trends, user trends, technology trends, offering changes, so that you can create an agile organization that's adapting to your environment, because some of these trends, we go to the next slide here, Mike. Some of these trends are coming at us, very quickly. So what is, print infrastructure 2.0? It's sort of a kind of a extension or mimicking Web 2.0 in many ways, right? Next slide. So you have this cumulative change of rapidly evolving technologies, some of it related specifically to printed document infrastructures, and a lot of them not, but yet all coming together to create a new formula, a new recipe that leading edge organizations, like yours in higher ed and others are embracing and creating new formulas for success, right? To deal with their users, to deal with their infrastructure, and to address support mechanisms and the economics in and around all of that, to create themselves for the future. So new user experiences have to be combined with simplified management. There's just not an endless amount of money, and you have to be able to do this in a leaner way. So how do we integrate that IT architecture that's in a very secure and robust environment when you have a confluence of a whole bunch of new technologies, right? It's not like the old days of just connected printers to your own network, everything's under your control. The print infrastructure 2.0 paradigm of the future has more ingredients that are extended beyond what you would consider to be in your immediate care and concern, right? So you have to wrap that all together and put, a series of management controls, security controls, financial controls in and around that. But what's our goal? So our goal is to create a service that's there for your students, your faculty, and your staff that just behaves like a refrigerator, right? It just needs to be simple to use. It needs to be easily accessible. It needs to be monetized the right way. They just have to get work done. Most organizations have implemented lots of ERP or student information systems, lots of applications that have essentially digitized, call it 60 to 70%, maybe 75% of your information. But most organizations have between 20 and 35% of their information that's still on paper media, right? It's declining. It's declining. For sure it's declining. Depending upon the industry that you are in, the state of decline and change of the evolution away from printed media varies, right? We see a lot of this in central print facilities that we run for institutions where lots of textbooks or lots of workbooks and lots of learning media is going digital, but there's still some paper out there. So how do I how do I leverage the paper in two directions, right? I've got to get out and put information on paper, and I got to get information off of paper and into my bigger ecosystem. So how does that misnomer of print infrastructure, because it's really a print and document infrastructure, how do I get the off-ramp and the on-ramp dynamics of that infrastructure working best in my larger information ecosystem and my IT architecture? So if you imagine kind of three convergent circles of technology, IT technology infrastructure, your information ecosystem, and then you have your print and document specialty function devices and processes that are all interconnected. So leading edge organizations that see those three dynamics all kind of coming together, see the evolution of print infrastructure 2.0. And Mike and I work with organizations like yours in higher education and with commercial enterprises, and we work with technology people like yourselves to architect and design those kind of new infrastructures to meet new goals that meet user needs, infrastructure needs, and the economics related to that plus support. So making it simple, making it reliable and robust, really important. Now, as you look at these trends, you could probably have all written these trends out. You've probably been on lots of sessions already here in this conference that relate to these trends because these are the mega trends and these are IT-related mega trends. And guess what? Print infrastructure 2.0 is tied into all these mega trends. In fact, these are what's driving the evolution to print infrastructure 2.0 strategies that you and your colleagues are creating at higher ed institutions across Canada, colleges, universities, even some secondary schools, right? Embracing all these dynamics and changes. So they all come together. What we'll present to you is the formula and the recipe that we see that relates more specifically to your environment, make it relevant to you, right? And as well as maybe anecdotally share with you in some other circumstances how they're very much like you, whether they're a bank or an insurance company or a retail operation, because they're all trying to solve the same thing. A robust infrastructure that's economical to run, easy to support, and serves users in new ways that it's not done before. So we'll have a look at these 6 areas. We'll have a bit of kind of more meat on in and around each one of them. We'd like you to maybe, if you want to kind of hold on to your questions to the end, and we'll delve into your questions because we'll only plan to take your kind of 25 to 30 minutes in information sharing, and then after that we can make it more kind of conversational if that's okay with you. So in and around analytics, so the objective here, of course, is you have this infrastructure and it's being used. And you have a lot of transactions going through infrastructure. Well, you want to capture and gather all of that data, and you want to capture all that data. And maybe you want to do this yourself. Maybe you don't. You probably don't. You want to be given this to you. You want to be given these tools from your partners, right? So that you can manage your business. But to manage your business and where your business is going, you're going to want to consider like 3 pretty important dynamics here. Right? So we find, Mike and I find, that folks like you expect us to bring to them ideas, if not solutions, about how analytics can be fed to them so that you and then your business lines of business colleagues, whether it's the provosts or the deans, lead faculty, administrators, finance, IT yourselves, right? How your colleagues can make decisions about where to take your organizations to serve students, serve faculty, serve administration. Right? Because we all have to make sure we leverage our asset base the right way, making significant investments in your assets. How have I got it deployed the right way? Is it doing the right thing? So what applications am I serving up? What processes am I serving? And do I have the least amount of asset involved for the best amount of return? Well, I only could do that if I have some data. So you need to be fed information. And you might want to change your economics. Economics might be your billing structure, your bill out, your charge back, your value creation economics, right? We do find that all institutions, higher ed institutions across Canada, there's quite a bit of variation in terms of your cultural focus and priority related to economics. And so we just go with that. It is what it is. Some organizations are a full cost recovery. Some organizations are, I need to make money in this. Some organizations are, I'm going to bill it all back to our users. We just listen to what your priorities are, and then bring you best practices, tools, and capabilities to help you configure or configure with you an approach that makes sense to your environment. And what new services can I introduce if I look at my printed document infrastructure as an off-ramp and an on-ramp? What can I introduce to my users to help them get work done more simply? Next slide. So now Mike will give you some insights in terms of how these kind of deliverables on the left-hand side are delivered through Print Infrastructure 2.0 technologies and processes.
So the analytics are all based around information and making intelligent decisions, right? So having the ability to have an infrastructure that supports your end users, gathering that data, so there's transactional data, what kind of activity is happening within your environment, what kind of usage is occurring. So you're probably noticing that the trends are less print, more scanning, less of the printing to a dedicated device and the ability to print anywhere. So taking all of that information and being able to make recommendations around where devices are placed, what kind of device is going to be placed there, and what features are required on that device. You have to have the appropriate amount of tools to be able to gather that information, bring out that, the industry trend is the big data information, so that get all that information around the trends that your users are doing to be able to make those decisions around the devices. You also want to have the ability to make an informed decision. One of the things that we do really well with our customers, and that our customers are asking us to do, is this the right strategy? Is this the right placement? Is this the right approach for our end user communities, right? Is putting 3 different devices in one area or just one? So having the data there to make those recommendations is critical. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So we've worked with the University of Calgary as an example for many years. They're kind of a bit of a leading edge in terms of the way they look at the print infrastructure. And we work with them for about 6 years now on this evolution. And they use analytics heavily, right? They won some process awards over time. You might have seen them written up, right? So they've used the analytics that they capture off of a very extensive network or very extensive infrastructure spread across a very large campus. And they've captured that in those analytics, they've captured that data to make sure that, kind of where jobs are being done and the kind of output that's being created, and also creating digital on-ramps have helped that organization kind of evolve and change. So that's an example of where we've helped them become more agile as an institution, large growing organization. We've done the same thing. There's all your institutions are kind of complex. You're multi-building campuses, multi-faculty, you're quite sophisticated structures, right? And we in the commercial environment would work with large organizations like retailers that have hundreds of operations scattered across Canada, and some large locations, some smaller locations, and they need to capture the data that's going on in all of those locations to aggregate their view, right? To make decisions. Okay, Mike, next slide. Okay, so security. So Mike will tell you a story about what's going on in a large provincial government, just kind of sort of extending here some different reference points for you, but where this is really paramount, because now the construct of Print Infrastructure 2.0 is taking you outside of the realm of everything that's just under your own control. Right? We're mixing piece parts that are beyond, what is in your kind of behind your own firewall or in your own buildings. So you're blending in the cloud, you have your own physical devices on site, using multiple types of software. How do I make this secure? So Mike will take us through a couple of examples of that.
Sure. So what are the leading industry leading companies, whether they are higher ed or private enterprise? They're going to create a plan. They're going to take that plan and apply it across their infrastructure. So it's not necessarily, it's not whether it's a print device, whether it's a scanning device, whether it's a laptop, a PC, or a server. They all have commonality around the approach to security, right? So once you've established that plan, you've put it in place, then the next thing you're going to worry about is going to be around that content. So whether it's confidential information, secure information, or just everyday correspondences, that information needs to travel, whether it's from point A, which it could be a laptop, over to a print device, and once it's outputted, that whole transaction needs to be secure. And so that's really what, in our environment, that's what we see as security is key. The devices themselves, right? So nowadays, as we talked about, we're going to use an example a little bit later, but when you walk up to a multifunction device or a printer, that device now has processing capabilities, it'll have a hard drive, and it has access to your network. We've heard the stories of individuals, coming into those type of devices, either hacking them and making them melt, or trying to access the information that's contained within those devices. So working with a partner that has the ability to assure, so measure, using that same tools that we were talking about around analytics, using those same tools around being able to deliver the plan around security. Things like the incorporation of existing technologies, that's industry-leading technologies such as McAfee and Cisco, in assuring that not only that the right protocol, the right ports are turned on and off, but that the content within those devices is going to be secure. We really didn't want to make this about Xerox today, but we want to talk about leaders in the industry. And when it comes to McAfee, Cisco, and Xerox partnership, we are a leader. And the trend is going to be, you're going to see your vendor community out there are going to be starting to talk about this. So examples are the whitelisting. So something, whether it's a communication executable or a packet that comes into the device, if it's not part of its OS and is not recognized through our embedded McAfee, it's not going to get executed, it'll be ignored. And Cisco with TrustSec and identity services, making sure that the individual that's accessing your infrastructure, whether it's a multifunction device or a laptop or a PC, they're recognized, authenticated, and have rights to use. Right? So those are the trends within security. Is that so? You have to be able to measure and monitor, of course. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But you also need to authorize, ensure that those individuals that are accessing the information in your infrastructure are allowed to.
Okay, Mike, any special changes or evolution with the logging of an audit to create audit trails for accessing, an environment, or being able to, from a central console for, people who want to manage administration in their environment, to give them some configuration flexibility in the implementation of security rules?
Right, so we have, there's the device compliance. So there's, if you go to any vendor site and you look up a particular model and you say, what's the password to get into administration of the device? Chances are, if you go to that device anywhere in Canada, you're going to access it, right? Password management, centralized password management is key. Centralized configuration and monitoring and auditing of those devices is very important. The example of the provincial government that Jim was talking about, not only does the device have to be secure, but a lot of times the people that are interacting with that device, so whether it's a service technician, whether it's an account manager, whether it's a project manager that's dealing with that account, they need to be security cleared. They need to be badged. So those are the kind of things that you want to be aware of when you're dealing with a vendor, is that not only is the piece of equipment entrusted within your environment secure, but the people that are touching it as well.
Okay.
Go on, next
So
one.
that's an interesting segue. Security is important. Next slide, Mike, is about the cloud, because as we see everywhere, the cloud is a key component in print infrastructure 2.0 composition. Right? The formula is changing, and so just want to maybe the next slide here,
Sure.
Mike. So we'll kind of let Mike make the relationship with secure, because you're going to find now that the construct is going to have a local device configuration element. And then there's going to be a set of cloud features, and you're going to create a platform as a service infrastructure, right? It's sort of a shape-shifting definition or a version of platform as a service, but that's really what we're out to build together, right? So that as your users are accessing the device in your physical environment, there is an interaction and interoperability with what's happening here with your users and what's happening in the cloud. So in the cloud is where you'd find the control mechanisms, the monitoring of what's going on with the transactions, the databases that are storing all the transactions, the analytical tools, all those kind of on demand, I need to get information from, client's perspective, right? All of that's hosted and managed by your vendor partner, right? To create this kind of a virtualized, agile print infrastructure 2.0. So Mike, maybe you could just tie in security and how like a cloud element of this sort of two-tiered kind of structure where there are components in the cloud. How does a vendor demonstrate that its cloud portions that it's delivering are secure as well.
Right. So there's, when you talk cloud, there's definitions, cloud's a word. But you have your local and your external clouds. Example of, I don't know if you're familiar or if you've had the opportunity to review the Mcgill print strategy, right? So Mcgill's strategy is cloud, so that I can print from any device I have or own to any device within their infrastructure. In our definition, that's really what cloud printing is about. Now, what's important is that I'm probably not teaching you anything, but in your environment, you're not going to be a single vendor environment. You're going to have multiple brands, multiple model types, color, black and white, and all different kinds of features. So yeah, your cloud solution, when it comes to your end users, all of that needs to be accessible. So you've got all these machines that are out there, but you also have multiple different types of platforms. You've got, we're going to get into mobility afterwards, but you've got Macintosh, Linux, PC, you've got smartphones, and then you've got all of these cloud-based solutions that those individuals are using. All of them need to be tied in and have the ability. I think key is easy to use and deploy to your end users so that they can print and go get a little bit like the refrigerator example. I send something to print, I walk up to a device and it's there waiting for me, or I release it, right? That's really what we want to have the ability to offer to our end users. But along with that, we need to offer a certain level of security so that the document, once it leaves their location and is handled within that cloud, is secure, and on its way out to the device is secure, and output it to that end user. So this is where accountability and authentication or authorization comes in. You need to be able to identify the user easily. You don't want them having to type his credentials at the device, maybe swipe card, something that's easy so that they can access that device and that document easily. On the reverse side of it, the cloud also offers, well, we've got Google Docs, SharePoint, on and on and on. I may want to have the ability to take a hard copy paper and now introduce it into my infrastructure digitally. Again, we need to be able to authenticate that user. We need to be able to track and account for that transaction and handle the document from its inception at the device into where it's going to be ultimately stored, secure. That's what really our definition of cloud within your environments is.
So Mcgill embraced the cloud, use it as leverage point for revenue generation, right? They wanted to offer their students a new service, very simple, refrigerator-like, and their revenue experience has been very positive. It's kind of like when Tim Hortons went through drive-through, it helped out their sales a lot, right? You make it easy for customers to buy, show them how easy it is to buy, they'll bring the money to you, right? So that embrace or application or implementation of a print infrastructure 2.0 construct at Mcgill turned out very positive, and I'm sure you could contact your IT colleagues there or their business side of their operations there. They've been at it now for probably about 6 months to 9 months, where it's been fully functional. Yeah, it took them about a year to kind of architect it and get implemented, but that's how they've leveraged print infrastructure 2.0 as a strategy to drive more revenue. Okay, so next slide. So now let's talk about mobility, and of course everyone's dealing with this every day in your environment with your students, with your customers, as they're bringing lots of new expectations on my new devices. But I travel a lot, and I also find that in airports is a great example targeting mobile users, right? Again, it's just to make it dead simple that from almost any device that I've got of my choice, of my preference, if I need to have something printed, I'll go to some sort of federated, some device, a device that's federated in some cloud infrastructure, right? I'll send my print job up and I'll get it printed, and there'll be an e-commerce component, right? So in Mcgill, they monetize or run an e-commerce transaction for that student, so they get paid. So Mcgill gets paid before that paper comes out in the print infrastructure, right? They're going to apply that to scanning as well. So you want to make sure that you get the money from your customer for services provided, right? So Mcgill's, a good example of embracing and leveraging mobility or mobile devices as well. It's all user driven, right? So we have to react to all of these trends. We have to react to our users' preference to using these devices and incorporate them into our infrastructure construct and security. And Mike, do you want to talk a bit about, kind of the multi-platform and accountability aspects on this, which are pretty important?
Sure. So again, because mobility is anything, there's so many different platforms. We've got iOS, Android, BlackBerry. We need to give the same level of service to all of those platforms. And because again, we mentioned the fact that we're multi-vendor environment, we have all these different type of devices. We need to offer the service to those devices as well for those users. You need, it's almost like we talked about platform as a service. This is almost like software as a service where you're going to have the ability to integrate within your existing infrastructure. You don't want to introduce anything that's new. You want to leverage what's there. Give your end users the ability to output. We actually, one of the big ones is AirPrint, right? With iOS, having the ability to just within my device submit a print job. So you have to be adaptable. You have to be, again, it's a lot like the cloud. You need to authenticate and authorize and account for or track that usage, and you want to make sure that it can be offered anywhere. So Mcgill has the infrastructure set up that if I'm a user, and a registered user or authenticated user, I can print any device in their environment, no matter where it's located, right? So you can go to that extreme, or you can have point of service, right? So you can have a lot like the University of Ottawa here, where they'll have kiosks located strategically around the university and offer it that way. So it's got to be that flexible.
Right, and also working with a couple of universities out in Western Canada now that are looking at how they can leverage what they already have in their print infrastructure, extend it to make it more mobile, and put an e-commerce layer around it. Again, it's all about the students in this particular case, right? And of course, your faculty and your staff are going to want to be, make it easy for them to use your service infrastructure, print and document service infrastructure. That's our goal, right? To help make that happen. Okay, so now, sometimes this feels a bit overwhelming, and you kind of change constructs and paradigms from the way it used to be, what I'm used to managing my print infrastructure. How am I going to deal with the support requirements, resource constraints, money constraints? So all of our customers tell us that, okay, this is all fun and fine to pursue all these new strategies, but this cannot be a big drain on my IT resources. This needs to be made as simple as possible. You need to be bringing to me kind of new tools and capabilities so that I have a chance to survive here and what I've got. I'm interested in some task offloading, okay? I want to get rid of some of the things I have to do for print infrastructure because I'm really all about student information services, or I'm really all about finance, or I'm really all about supporting research, whatever your primary kind of missions are, right? This is a service infrastructure, right? So lots of your IT colleagues tell us, I'd like to de-invest on that side because I need to put my resources over on this side, which are more mission critical. So then they say, okay, well, what have you got and what else is out there that can help make these infrastructures more self-diagnosing, almost self-repairing, proactive in nature? Why, to drive a higher predictable uptime, user satisfaction, et cetera, get out of all the print infrastructures of the past and all those problems. We like to see less, kicking dents in the machines. That's always nice when there's less frustration and less kicking of the devices, right? But you can see how it happens, right? Because there's also this sort of lost sense of ownership and responsibility amongst the user community because they don't care. They shouldn't care about how that infrastructure is maintained and supported. So your colleagues ask us for strategies to make sure that that infrastructure is more industrial strength, bulletproof, resilient, and self-correcting, right? Self-managing. So we do that, and we help them to drive better SLAs. All IT professionals are saying we're now going to have a prescriptive set of service level agreements around our print infrastructure. Often don't exist today. We expect standardization across multiple vendor types, right? You have very limited thresholds that you can operate within as your vendor partner, right? And you have an accountability to deliver against that, report against that, right? And there could even be penalties, right? Because this infrastructure becomes more and more important as you build it into a revenue generating strategy to serve your students, to keep your faculty and admin and staff productive, right? And you just don't want to do it anymore, right? So You hold us accountable for it, though. So, Mike, maybe you can talk about some of the examples of how these print infrastructures under 2.0 technologies are made to be more sort of self-diagnosing, self-healing,
Right.
to get IT out of that game.
Right. So what I've seen across the country and actually globally is the fact that our customers are looking for the ability to standardize. And when I say standardize, I mean the way the device is configured, the way the device interacts with the end users, and the way it's supported. So whether it says HP, Canon, Lexmark, Xerox on the front of the device, really doesn't matter to the customers. The output, satisfaction of end users is what counts. So having the ability to take that holistic approach to a fleet, deliver on what we talked about, configuration management. So making sure that they're all talking the same language, going the same way in the highway, and that nobody's veering off. So reporting on the fact or not that the device has been modified, changed, is important. Along with that, because it's multi-vendor and multi-platform, because you're going to need driver management. So what kind of drivers are you using? Are you using unified drivers, universal drivers? Are you using vendor-specific, device-specific drivers? How are you deploying them? Right? How are you configuring them? Are they meeting your standards for sustainability, single-sided, double-sided, color, black and white, 3-hole punch, stapled or not? How does your end user get that information? And of course, reporting. So, and reporting is not, this machine did this much volume, but it's more on, here's how many changes have occurred within your environment. Here's how many moves. Here's how much activity around device placement, around, adding and removing devices within your fleet, and then monitoring. And what monitoring does is the ability to be proactive. So an example of that would be that the device sends out an alert, says I'm having an issue, and dispatched a technician, the device is fixed, and no one's noticed. That's the perfect environment. But that's what tools, so hosted and on-site tools, can give you in servicing your end user community.
Okay, all right. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we'll talk about money now. So it's a driver for everything, right? It's one of the key trends. How do I deal with the economics in around creating an infrastructure, providing services to my students, to my faculty, to my administration? Next slide. So we hear this one lots, right? So I have to do what I'm doing for less money. And depending upon what province you're in, the pressures vary. Some of it is quite extreme. Some of it's not so bad, an institution to institution. But typically folks are saying, listen, I'm actually not certain how much I'm spending. It's probably too much. So I need to find out how much I'm spending now. And whatever that number is, and I'll validate with you, whatever that number is, I need to take 15 to 30% out of that cost. I have to find a way to do it cheaper. Right? So what's my economic plan? How can you help me? How can we together deliver this infrastructure, this service capability for less money? So we have to create a blueprint for that. That blueprint is no different, absolutely no different than the blueprints that relate to infrastructure or security or user interface. It's exactly the same blueprint, right? And it's as important, right, to drive that cost reduction outcome. The next thing is, organizations are debating, the deployment of capital. Do I want to own this infrastructure, or do I want to rent it and use it, right? Do I want to buy stuff? Do I want to lease stuff? Do I want to get locked in? What do I view as locked in? Do I want a paper copy? Whatever. The models in which universities are wanting to pay for these kind of infrastructures now varies between this CapEx and this OpEx model, right? And it depends, right? And this is kind of almost a visceral thing, right? It's like, it's the way you want to look at it, interpret it. Some people are hardcore religious about, I'm only going to go operating expense, means I'm only paying for a cost per copy. Many studies can show that that's brilliant in many areas and absolute disaster in certain other areas of print infrastructures, right? Others are deadlocked in going and lease and owning devices, okay? So we're somewhat agnostic to that. To us, it's an input variable to create an infrastructure, a solution that makes sense financially. Right? But these are the debates and these are the issues that your colleagues raise with us all the time across Canada in higher ed institutions. Finding the capital to spend seems to be less favorable, and going more towards a lesser risk kind of variable usage model seems to be more of the trend. Next. And then the internal economics, as we talked about, this is about, who's paying for this and how do those costs get shared, right? And in environments that are, highly democratic, with lots of different decision makers and lots of different stakeholders, that's always an interesting roadmap to navigate, right? Where you're exercising a little bit of influence, small c control if you want, right? Maybe providing some direction and guidance on what that infrastructure should look like in terms of who the players are and what's in there, right? And accommodating the particular requirements of the arts faculty or the business faculty or engineering. That's always an interesting sort of playoff. But then working out the economics so that it makes sense. Because at the end of the day, we do see where lots of people have lots of faculties and departments are all doing their own thing. That's proven to be kind of the least cost-effective model and the most difficult to overcome to get to a higher level of service where you have standardization and aggregation, right, of capabilities. So as you resolve your internal economics, we can help. I mean, tools help out, and customers are using tools to have the data, to do the analysis, to go to their colleagues to say, here's how much you used, here's the price per pound or per whatever the utility model is, right? And here you go, that's your fair share, right? If it can be made fair and transparent, you have a better chance, especially in a university environment. We work at Xerox. There is no voice. It's just all, it's all kind of command and control, right? It comes down from the top. But in your environments, we respect and understand the high democratic structure of your organizations, right? Transparency and data usually win the day. Then along with a little negotiation with the administration, with the staff, or with the faculty on how it should be shared, right? The next slide. Okay, revenue driving. So for some, this is the holy grail. This is where they want to go. The students have the money. They want to get the money. Let's do stuff for students. So the Mcgill example of that is a distributed, we would call it office or distributed print infrastructure, right? Kind of leading edge. So make it easy for my students to print anywhere. They can walk in any building and grab a Coke out of a vending machine, just about. They need to be able to grab a report just about anywhere, and I'm going to make my whatever cents per page or whatever have you, or flat fee for using the service for the year, whatever have you. All kinds of different economic models you can put in place, right? Make it real simple. I want to drive revenue, right? You can't cut your cost to long-term survival. You have to have both sides of this equation at work, right? And our corporate clients, commercial clients, right? We always work on both sides of that equation, right? Okay. And then just to kind of conclude in the last 2 minutes or so, how do we kind of hang on for this ride of embracing the future? So a few thoughts here we can share with you. And so we find that you and your colleagues that embrace us or that engage us in these kind of conversations, they start off with I want to do this differently. I need to do this differently. I need to provide this kind of new capability. My faculty is asking for this. My students need this. The business faculty is asking for that. There's the drivers, right? There's the drivers that are coming to play in terms of what the organization is demanding. And your teams tend to be the focal points, the conduits of aggregating all those needs, right? And basically kind of crafting the mission and purpose for what this infrastructure is all about, because you're the experts in, scoping it, selecting it, installing it, running it, operating it, and then figuring out the economics collaboratively with your colleagues, right? So what's it going to be all about? And as we want to make a decision that's kind of 5 to 7 year future forward, right? Because these things all take time to re-implement if you're going to put a new one in, right? When I'm looking future forward, you would consider all of the mega trends we've just talked about to this point in time, right? As these are my driving forces that are going to impact my decision. And Mike, it would kick over to you to ask issues about architecture planning.
Right, so architecture planning, so embracing the future, what I've seen trending is the fact that, there's an infrastructure that's here, there's a cost associated with that infrastructure. So I want to do it with less, so serverless printing, or doing away with, the typical file and print and server environment is really growing. I've seen it probably the last 5 or 6 major RFPs that I've seen come out this year all have a component of, we want to do it with less servers or with none. We want to manage our infrastructure with more self-serve around end users, centrally managed, platform management, but the end users on their own. So that's a really big trend that's coming.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. So I just got back from Dublin on the weekend, and here's an interesting process automation that relates to print and document infrastructure. So usually you show up at customs, you get in these dreaded long lines, right? Well, I was triaged. So they triaged those who are Canadian residents from international, right? And the long lineup was over there, and the Canadians went over there. Has anybody seen this now? It's pretty slick, isn't it, eh? Because I was through, the punchline is I got through customs like in about 3 to 4 minutes, right? So you get sorted over to a kiosk, right? Now it's man and machine, woman and machine, right? And so it's document intensive. So what are my 2 documents? I've got my passport and I've got my international card, right? My declaration card, right? Scan my passport. That's an MFD. That's a multifunction device. Doesn't look like ours, but it's a multifunction device, right? It's scanning my document. It's connecting to the cloud. It's checking. It's coming back and saying, yeah, we recognize you. You're on a white list. You're okay, or you're not on a black list, right? Boom. Then insert that little card. I forgot to check a box on a section on my declaration card. It came back and said, you have to check a box in section 5 on your card. Some intelligence in there, right? I check my box. I put it back in. It does some compute, whatever have you, and then it prints out my international document card with a number on it. I don't know whether it's good or bad. I got a number and I got my card, and this is like within, I don't know, a minute or 2. It's pretty quick, isn't it? Eh? It's really slick. And then you go, and now you're going to go. There's 2 customs officers there, and there's a pack of us there, and all they're doing is they're looking at the card, quick look at your passport, and you're done. Right? That's process automation, and you have an MFD right there in the workflow. And so what is done? So now what's their productivity? Man, those customs officers are putting through, I would guess, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 times the amount of people in an hour, right? As a customer arriving, man, I'm moving through there. I'm liking that whole process. It feels pretty good, right? Document intensive, 2 simple little documents, document intensive process being automated using Print Infrastructure 2.0. That's just what happened to me on Saturday coming back from Dublin, right? Just to kind of, it's maybe goofy, maybe silly, but I tell you what, it's all relevant, right? It's all relevant. How can we use all of these technology components in some kind of infrastructure to help work get done simpler so customers are happier, right? They didn't monetize me for money there, but you can monetize for money with some, with your students, right? So that's all we've got. Hopefully we've shared some of your experiences with you that are maybe informative, or maybe just like, oh, got one more. Oh. Well, there you go. The students. Well, I don't know. That sounds a bit sort of professorial, and I'm definitely not one of those, but that's what it's all about. And they are, and their needs are changing fast, right? And they're very demanding. So all of your colleagues across Canada start off by saying to us, we want to do something different, and these students are changing fast. I need an agile infrastructure, and I need an adaptive business model to embrace my students. And how can I do that in my print and document ecosystem? So hopefully we've provided some little tidbits, some sharing and working with your colleagues across Canada in higher education and some commercial environments where they're all facing challenges and opportunities like you've got. And how can you look at this print and document infrastructure maybe in a different way as kind of flexed and impacted by the mega trends that we shared with you here today. So thank you for your time. We do appreciate it.
I don't think the presentation was intentional. They shut you down right at the time.
Yeah, I see that. We got about 2 minutes to go.
No, I have the button back.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go.
I mean, we do have a minute. If somebody had a question they would like to ask, we are going into break as well. So if you do want to have a further conversation with either Jim or break, I'm sure we'll be hanging around.
We'd love to.
People at the door
Be our
or
pleasure.
walk with them with coffee.
Be our pleasure, yeah.
Right.
In your experience in getting into a disciplined print environment, what are the greatest business case levers? Is it cost savings, capital equipment, is it consumables? Where am I gonna go to my boss and say, this is the reason why we should do this?
Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
please, for your-
So the question is, what are the key business drivers that would help justify an evolution towards this kind of an environment, right? Okay, so optimization of assets, optimizations of all the processes in and around supporting this infrastructure, because right now they're heavy and they're complicated, right? So they can be optimized, and we do that with all of our customers. So you reduce cost in the processes. Definitely you want to reduce the amount of paper coming out, okay? paper is the big driver for cost, right? So you find ways so that, so tools can help reduce about 10 to 12% of the amount of orphaned print jobs sent out there that people don't pick up at devices, as an example, right? That's kind of low-hanging fruit. Digitizing processes to eliminate the reproduction of paper that are going from person to person, right? Not adding a lot of value, medium for communication. There's a different way to do it. So eliminating paper. So there's three. Am I getting that?
So tied to what we discussed today around the cloud, so the cloud actually is one of the big drivers in dropping costs, because you have to authenticate, you have to authorize before you can release. I need to know who you are to get you your document, right? So it's a big driver in dropping costs. I think design principles around how aggressive you want to be in how many devices you want to authorize to your end user community. I've seen examples of federal government where it's a one device per 30 users, and industry standards about one device per 9 users. So if you want to look at where you are today, are you a 3-to-1 or 1-to-1 or 2-to-1? If you want to drive to 8-to-1, the optimization that you mentioned is probably the biggest low-hanging fruit.
Okay, with that,
Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very
much.
Thanks.